Piatz. I'm delighted.
Glad to be here.
It's 8:30 a.m. My gosh, at our ages, this is not always easy to get up this early.
I know we're up, right? Up and about. Did you
So-
have your cereal this morning?
So how's it feel to be the brother-in-law of Dan Lanetta?
Oh, geez. I mean, to be the brother-in-law of somebody like that is absolutely fabulous. I mean, he's such a good kid. Not a kid anymore, and he's gone so far from Jamestown to where he's at now.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's an honor.
So Bruce, what did your dad do for a living?
Oh, he was just a factory worker. Not just, but in those days, he was a factory worker. My mom and dad raised 3 children on about $2,000 to $3,000 a year. It was amazing.
Yeah.
We ate steak. We always ate good. Had enough clothes, and it was a nice town. And factories were booming. And Crescent Tool was waking me up every morning, and it was nice. Really
So
nice.
you're a south side of town type of guy?
I was on Allen Street.
Island Street, okay.
Yeah, between Skippy's and Stravato's and Mike and Sam. So it was all walking distance if I've drank too much.
There you go. And you went to school, did you go to Jefferson?
Yes, I did.
And what about elementary school?
Bush.
Bush? So Bush, Jefferson's my path. That's my path as well. I just was up in Allen Park.
Yeah.
That's where I lived.
Well, we walked every day too.
Yeah.
You know,
Went up the hill, the
up the hill.
the
Stopped at-
reservoir.
Yep. Stopped at Sandy's for a pork pie and just had a couple the other day, as a matter of fact.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I hadn't thought about that in a while.
Yeah.
Fudgy's still running it? No, Sandy's a Fody.
Yeah. Sandy's
Right.
is a Fody. Yeah. He has the catering business.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then Fudgy's Parnella's was
He's on Allen Street still.
Allen Street. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of a relation there, but really distant.
And up on the hill was the best subs in town, Rogoli's.
Rigoli's. Yeah. It was a good neighborhood.
Yeah.
Now you got to be careful, even if you're driving through.
Yeah.
You know, not too good now.
It's changed.
And if you notice, downtown is beautiful, but the perimeter is like a battle zone. It's pretty sad. And what they did with the comedy center is really nice, but I wish that money could have been used for the outskirts of town somehow.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. And here we are, and we'll probably die here.
So, well, you should write a letter to the editor every once in a while to express your views. That would be good.
Well, you're probably not going to print this, but the hell with that Post-Journal, because they won't print me anymore.
Really?
No.
You were there all the time.
I was there all the time, yeah. And I think I told them they were getting a little too liberal for me, and we parted companies. I was thinking about doing something in the Gazette.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, but
Well, I always enjoyed your letters. So then, how did you graduated from high school, Jamestown High School?
right.
Then take me down your career path.
Well, I graduated in '63. I went in the Marine Corps for 4 years. Was an aircraft mechanic. Got an early out to go to college at JCC. Went to work for Bankers Trust or Bank of Jamestown, whatever they were calling it at the time. Got into the computer department there, first in collections, computer department. Bartended at the pub part-time. Then they were cutting back at the bank, and I was offered another position, but I turned it down, left. And 2 weeks later, I applied at the Resource Center and started to work for Mike Raymond.
So what time period was that when you started your work at the Resource Center?
It had to be around 1978, which was just about the time of the Willowbrook deinstitutionalization process.
So you meet Mike Raymond, Executive Director, for the first time. What's your reaction?
Really good. He's really articulate. You could tell he was really smart. And I respected him, and that was my opinion.
What were they looking for? What was the job description that you applied for?
Well, they had one group home, and Mike hired me to open up additional homes. He sent me to Watertown, New York, because they had a couple of homes there. I spent some time there getting the feel for it. I didn't quite like it. It seemed like it was just a little bit too institutional, their housing facilities. So we started trying to find owners who had a big house, who were willing to lease it to us, rent it to us. Did the studies, financial studies, feasibilities, and all of that, and we kind of figured that 5 to 7 people, and okay, how are we going to pay? How are we going to finance it? We just kept rolling along. We opened a few here in Jamestown, and then I went to Dunkirk and Westfield, and then HUD got involved and opened up the apartments. Oh, and there was another one on Pardee that I opened in Willow Avenue. So it was fun.
It was a go-go time period. You may remember this. There was a group home, one of the first ones, where you, again, created a lease, large home, and it was around here someplace.
Yeah, it was right on 4th.
4th Street, yeah.
Yeah, just down the street a bit.
And here's what I remember, is the owner defaulted on his payments to Northwest Bank. And we had a lease. And of course, you'd done an awful lot of leasehold improvements, you know, there, and all of a sudden, it was subject to a foreclosure. And I remember almost at the last minute, Mike coming to me and saying, Greg, we gotta do something. So maybe you were involved in that meeting with Northwest, who was foreclosing, and we then created out of whole cloth Chautauqua Rehabilitation Facilities Corp., a for-profit corporation to essentially buy the building from Northwest out of foreclosure, then we owned it, and then could lease it to the Resource Center.
Was that after I left?
No, that was in the early days, because it was,
Oh, then right when I started?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
because I remember we were under, the 4th Street was the one that triggered it, and then there was one right after it. Another location we had, which you had set up, again, foreclosure. So all of a sudden, that was the beginning of this corporation, Chautauqua Rehabilitation, which ultimately all our residential property went into for a period of time. So that was, what you just talked about is exactly what you did. You had to do the economics to make sure we got reimbursement and
Sure.
all of that stuff. When the HUD got involved, you know, all of a sudden you had various locations, especially up, you work with Seymour Minsker, you work with Milt Battler. Do you remember those time periods?
I do. I wasn't heavily involved in that. I was more involved in the homes that I had opened up with Mike. But that was another thing, that Benedict Avenue facility with the floor that went up and down in the pool. I mean, that guy could talk anybody out of anything. I'm telling you, he was really articulate that way. In fact, when we first met, he was looking for some contractors to do some work. And I'm going to call the guy Nick. I told him about Nick. So Nick went in and talked to him, and then Nick came out. I said, hey, how'd it go, Nick? And he says, well, I don't know. I said, why? What do you mean? He said, that guy can talk me into buying the Brooklyn Bridge. So,
He was a genius when it came to that
he
stuff.
was, yep,
And our sense was that after the Willowbrook decree, that Mike was really the head of the class in the state
yes.
to get monies.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, it's just like the stars lined up for him. I mean, he got in right on the ground floor, and he spoke their language, and he was able to get a lot of money and get things done. I mean, once he got it, he wasn't too careful about what he spent, but until he brought in Becky Brummergen,
Yeah.
and she straightened the finances out. She was good.
All of that. Mike was 10,000 feet all the time. So what did he have you doing? I mean, you're on the ground, the two of you guys drive around looking for locations, and then what?
Well, I was also responsible for the hiring and the firing.
Ah.
So, there was a lot to do, and the maintenance and the problems, the staffing, the termination. So I was always busy. Of course, we did ride around a lot, didn't we?
You did. I have a vision of being in Mike's car loaded with pop cans.
Beer cans.
Beer, that too. A lot of cans.
You can take that out if you like.
No. We've talked about that. Yeah, we rode around a lot. Mike Moraine was going a mile a minute all the time.
Yeah.
And you and me and his brain over time. What were some of the challenges, though, of as you're looking at locations? And I'm just looking back in 1982. This is a timeline that Steve put together. We talked about it was a big year for the agency. You had Willow Trace project in Jamestown. You had Forest Avenue, Willow Avenue, Benedict Avenue, supportive apartments. You had Harris Avenue, a recreation center, swimming pool. Mm-hmm. That was amazing. We all went up and tested that as it went up and down. And opened a pharmacy and all of that. I mean, that was all part of you.
Yeah, yep. What was the question?
Well, the challenges, if you will, because so much was going on so quickly.
Yeah. The challenges to me were, I was afraid of the reaction in the community. Mm-hmm. Either by luck or by design, the board happened to hire somebody who was not a resident of Jamestown. Maybe they figured there was going to be a lot of dissension and flack and pushback. But there wasn't. There was not. Initially, for one of the homes or two of the homes, we had a little pushback in the community, but not much they could do about it with the Patterson bill. But then after that, there was hardly any complaints and no pushback that I can remember, even in Dunkirk. So,
What I remember, since I was the attorney for all that stuff and I have to go to all the public hearings, mm-hmm. You and I and Mike would sit there, and usually the supervisors knew of the Patterson bill. I mean, essentially, it affected the zoning on everything,
Right.
But they'd have public hearings, and there'd be 100 people who would be scowling and grousing, not in my backyard. And then there'd be a second public hearing, and there'd be 20 people. And then ultimately a third public hearing just before the vote, and there'd be 5 people, and they'd approve it.
And then after it opened, they'd bring you cookies.
Yeah. I forgot about that.
They did.
Yeah.
So that surprised me that we didn't get the pushback that we thought we'd get.
We had a single-family home on Hunt Road as you're sort of coming out, and that had wasn't that previously owned by a doctor or something like that?
I think so. Yes, I think you're right.
And there was a guy, and I'll use the name. His name is Duke, who lived catty corner, right around the corner, and he was pretty vocal against it, and ultimately became our biggest supporter.
Yeah. Once they found out that you know, these are just ordinary people, so to speak. I mean, they just didn't create any problems at all for us.
You created residential units in Dunkirk, both ends of the county. What was the reception like in the north end of the county?
I don't recall any real serious pushback in the North County either, in Westfield and Dunkirk. Maybe I've just forgotten about it, but I just don't recall a lot of animosity towards the program. I really don't.
We had a workshop there in the North County, and Mary Andrews. Did you have much interaction with Mary?
No, I did not. I'd stop there occasionally because one of the social workers had an office there, I believe, and maybe we had some problems in Dunkirk or Westfield, and that's the only time that I would really go there.
You were responsible for really the hiring and firing of contractors and people who did all this stuff. Were there certain go-to contractors in the area that you used more than others?
Well, yeah, Mike did. He used Nick. I think his name was in Grail. He used Rusciatano. These are people that he would get to do things, even construction work, and get their pay later. There's not a lot of people that would do that. And that's the way Mike was. He was smart that way. He knew he'd get the money, and he knew he'd be able to pay them. So those were the go-to guys. Then we had our own maintenance guy also, you know. He was full-time, so he would take care of the electrical work and you know, the minor repairs and that type of thing.
Was that Dave Brink?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was Dave Brink. I used to do a lot of golfing with Dave Brink.
Was that right? Yeah, stories. So, who did you interact mostly with, aside from Mike, at the center? Who was your kind of, the people that you dealt with mostly?
Joe DiCarlo.
Right.
Sam Restivo, when he came on board. Mostly Mike. Accounting department. And there was another guy, Tom, I forget his name.
Tisdale?
Tom Tisdale.
There's Tom McConnon also.
Both, yeah. But we all got along, so there weren't many problems that we had. I had initial problems with Becky because I'm looking at my P&L for the residential program, and I have a profit. Well, one day I looked at it, and I'm in the red. So I said, what the hell is this? So it was administrative expense. And she was right, but I got hot about that. I mean, you put me in the red with this administrative expense. Well, you have to do that, you know, and she did, and she was right. But I operated in the red for the rest of the time.
Well, I think that's how you operate, don't you, Steve? And you brought up something which was genius, how Mike would convince many people, including his lawyer, that you're going to get paid.
Yeah,
Trust me.
yeah,
And he had the ability to convince you to trust him.
he did,
And it worked.
yes.
We didn't know it at the
Right.
time because you're kind of rolling the dice, but that's a brilliance. And I remember working with Milt Battler. And Milt, he had an amazing relationship with him because Milt was able to see that and was able to fund, like on Foot Avenue, you know, that whole project and others, where he'd actually buy it, lease it, with an idea that the funding would come for the lease way down the road. He He did the bank, he bankrolled it.
I can't think of another person who could have done the job that Mike did. I mean, I can't think of anybody who could do that so quick. And he would just go from one project to the next, bang, 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 bang. And he got a lot done.
My own personal story is I joined the law firm Cadwell and Sharp, Sherry Cadwell, in 1977. And my boss was one of the incorporators of the Resource Center. And they brought on this brand new Mike Raymond, high energy, a lot of Coca-Cola infused and caffeine infused guy. And he basically said, you, Greg, you're young enough, you play with him. I can't. He's too far, too fast. And that was the beginning of it, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And Mike's, he had an infectious laugh. If there's anybody you walk into a room and he could start laughing, he get you. You were laughing with him.
Yeah, yeah.
May not have been funny, but he had a laugh.
Yeah. We used to pull a lot of gags on each other, and we had a lot of fun, too. I mean, I remember one time he had a abscessed tooth, and he was hungry and he needed a sandwich. So he had the cafeteria lady there make him a sandwich, and I took the sandwich and I put tinfoil in it. And I heard him scream from all the way on the other side of the building, Piatz, you so-and-so. He knew it was me right away.
Yeah.
Well, I locked the door to my office. So he gets a fire extinguisher and he sticks the nozzle under the door. I came out of there like Frosty the Snowman. And another time he's having a meeting with some real important guy, and he always drank tea or Coke or pop. He always had something in his hand.
Right.
So I put a rubber worm in there. I gave it to him. Well, his guest thought that was hilarious, but Mike didn't. So, well, we had a lot of fun like that, doing gags on each other.
Who were some of the other administrative heads at that time? Who were some of the other?
Clark Poppleton.
Clark?
He was another one. Trying to think of the people. Well, we talked about Joe. He was
Dr. Joe.
kind of in the next office, and Tisdale and McConnon and Poppleton.
Was Lou Lombardo there then at the time?
Yeah, Lou was there. He was like the media director.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he was there. You're right, he did have an office there. He wasn't around too much. He was always, out in the community doing things.
Stories. We all were talking we're reminiscing with Rebecca, as she would like to be called, Rebecca. Mm-hmm. And we all had our various stories with Kay, Neri, and Michael, and it's kind of crazy stuff. And you must have had a few with Michael, aside from the ones you just mentioned.
I do. Like I said, I was responsible for the hiring and firing of the group homes. Well, one time Mike hired an employee without my knowledge, and he worked at the Dunkirk facility. He happened to be a retired pro football player. So I started getting some complaints about his work up there. And I went back to Mike, and I said, this guy's got to go. We have to terminate him. And he says, okay, you fire him. I said, wait a minute. I said, you're the one that hired him. Why should I have to go fire him? He says, boss, employee. Boss, employee. Do we need to go to the blackboard? I said, no. So I went up and terminated him. Well, then, we're not going to show this on camera here. somebody gave me a plaque. This plaque is, this is like 40 years old. He gave me this plaque, and it says, Bruce, you go fire so-and-so. And I've had this for 40 years, waiting to throw this in your face. Here it is. And you're not getting it back, because I checked, and this card, this football card, is worth about $125,000 right now.
I was afraid this would come up. Funny you should say that. Because we talked about that. He interviewed me. I said, only once in all my years of relationship with the Resource Center, and certainly Mike, because I was close, did I ever exercise employment rights. Only once. And that was Al B. Miller. And I told the story about, somehow he knew that he had lost his job as athletic director at a high school, something. And I said, it'd be great to have him here, because that will introduce us to all the Buffalo Bills. We'll have golf tournaments, we'll do all that stuff. So he did. And even Brummagem yesterday, and through all the vague history of the fog of history, said, you, Greg Peterson, Al B. Miller, came out of nowhere. So I was fearful of this today. I didn't know where that card ended up. Yours. It's where appropriately it's yours, yeah.
Where'd you get it?
I had it. It was out of my collection. But we had an event, and it was at Moonbrook,
Yes, it was.
and I don't know what it was for.
Me neither.
But I was an MC, and for whatever reason, I thought, this is going to be a good gag gift at my expense. I mean, I'm the guy that's going to take a fall on the sword on this. I said, I didn't know, I didn't recall the details of who I ended up getting it to, and now we know. The mystery is solved, and God darn it, little did I realize in that brown bag. I thought it was donuts, Thought he was going to provide
I just
stuff.
found that a little while ago, and it was cracking me up.
Yeah, hang on to that. That's priceless. That'll change your estate planning.
Another time, he was noted for having a lot of wives, temporarily. So the third marriage, I was best man, I guess. Went on a honeymoon. 2 days into it, he calls me up, and I said, why are you calling me? You're supposed to be on your honeymoon. I said, is there trouble in paradise? He said, yep. So that lasted about 2 days.
Yeah. And then occasionally he would, Kay always told the story about, and she didn't tell a lot of things out of tail, but where Mike would spend a weekend with somebody, and then one day morning those individual would come in and say, hey, Mike hired me, and Kay would have to figure out, what, who? And
Yeah.
usually some fairly attractive, very attractive lady. Didn't last very long out there. And then Mike would, of course, disappear in his back room.
I think that was the case with Sam Restivo, too. He was there about 3 times, and Mike never showed up all 3 times.
Is that right?
Sam was another one. He was really fun to be with. I mean, he asked me one time, where you going? I said, well, I got to go clothesline somebody. He said, what do you mean clothesline? I said, fire them, because that was a football term. He knew right away. So from that point on, he said, we used the word clothesline.
Yeah.
Clothesline them. Get rid of them. Clothesline them.
Yeah. Oh, that's a takeout term, man, in football.
Yeah.
So Sam came as the
Personnel.
personnel. Now, he had just left, was it Panama? He was a superintendent or something? There you go.
Yep.
How long was he personnel?
Well, geez, that's almost 35 years ago. It had to be 2 to 3 years, maybe even longer. He developed a really good personnel policy. That was his expertise, and that's what the Resource Center went by, is that policy.
And then when Mike departed, Sam was the interim for a while, I think.
He was, yeah, until I think we hired Paul Shazana. In fact, I had called Paul when Mike left and told him that the position was opened, and me and Sam talked about it, and Paul was a good man, and they hired him.
Now, Paul had previously worked at the research center, right?
He did. He did.
What was his job there at that time?
I'm not sure, Greg. I want to say he was like a social worker, but I'm not 100% sure.
Your principal role was residential,
Right.
but at the same time, we got into manufacturing, Allied Industries. Were you drawn into that at all?
Only when they had a tough time getting tools to make the tent pegs. And one time I got a hold of a friend of mine in town who has a tool and die shop.
Mm-hmm.
He made a bunch of tools for them to keep going, to keep the clients busy. But other than that, that was Tom's position, Tom McCondon.
When did Greg come involved? Was it a little bit later? Greg Bender?
When I was gone,
Oh, really?
I think.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we didn't overlap.
No. Is he still there?
He recently retired.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sure, I got out after they started the retirement program.
Was that right?
Yeah.
So how long were you there, Bruce?
12 years.
12 years?
I got there, and I think in 1978, I think Willowbrook was ordered to close down in 75, so that was pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a job in itself initially, because they were under pressure, and they were dumping some really inappropriate people in the residential program.
Mm-hmm.
And that was tough. I mean, we had live-in staff, and they had to deal with it. And even a few times I went up and spent the night, especially up at the Fairmount Avenue complex. And it was kind of difficult to get that client back into a facility that was more appropriate than the residential setting. It was kind of sad, but it was rough on all the staff. I mean, especially when somebody's incontinent and they got to deal with that, and
Yeah.
not good.
When that all happened, there was a lot of, you mentioned community questioning about the mission of the Resource Center. Did you get a sense of that? I certainly did, being out in the community. But as a staffer, did you get a sense of the kind of community early days dealing with, I'm going to use the term unwashed, but, being developmentally disabled, mentally retarded folks?
I really didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the group homes had a lot to do with it, because a lot of people got to see that, hey, these aren't bad people. And I think that helped a lot. But I really don't remember a lot of pushback from the city of Jamestown.
At the time, they enjoyed the fact that we were a not-for-profit organization, but because we had this mechanism with the Chautauqua Rehabilitation Facilities, which was a for-profit, we were paying taxes. Mm-hmm. We were actually able to get in the rate from the state to pay, mortgage payments, taxes, because we were a for-profit. That changed later on, but that was we were quite the taxpayer.
You did a lot of work for us. How'd you get involved?
Well, I mentioned my boss, Sherry Cadwell, had a brother who was mentally retarded. So back in like '59, when it first got started, he was one of the incorporators, and he sort of was there. Mm-hmm. He did work occasionally for them. And when I came back, Mike had just come, 74, 75, and a lot of things were starting to happen. And Sherry Cadwell, who did a lot of corporate work, said, I don't have time for it, essentially. You have energy, try to keep up. Good luck.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mike glommed onto me, and I enjoyed going. My God, it was such a go-go time period.
One thing that always bothered me about this process was, okay, Willowbrook opened in, what, 1947? Yeah, I think it was 1947. The facility's designed to accommodate like 4,000 people. All of a sudden, it's 6,200. These people living in squalor. Rivera comes in and does with his cameras, and does an expose, and 7 years later it took, 7 years later, to empty out that sewer. That is incredible. I mean, how can they do that? And Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, visited the facility and called it a snake hole. Well, 7 years? It's just amazing that they could allow that to happen and those people to live like that. It just boggles my mind.
Yeah, they finally ended up with the Willowbrook Decree, and Mike Raymond, for our purposes, was the right person at the right time
Absolutely.
with a high degree of energy and vision. It seemed like he was writing the regulations for the state, and then they funded the regulations which Mike wrote
Yeah,
for our benefit.
yeah. We had the people who ruined the system help our system.
Yeah. So we, in many senses, were the beneficiary of a visionary.
Right.
He was a genius. You know, Mike. Did you? By the way, did you go to the funeral? Were you part of that group that went out to Mike's funeral?
No.
I'm trying to think.
Was it him? Because rumor was that it was somebody else.
Good question.
He could never live incognito. No, no way.
Well, that got to be the ongoing story, and for years with Kay and I, because I went out to the funeral, and then that's a whole story unto itself. But no casket, no body, and everybody mourned. And we had a big eulogy. If you remember, at Jamestown Community College, we had a memorial service, and I'm up there wailing or talking about Mike this, Mike that, and we walked away and saying, you know, someday he's going to watch this because it'll be on YouTube, and he'll be laughing his ass off. You know, listen to those guys talk about me. Listen to them, you know, because there was good question. Is he still around? So I would always call Kay occasionally. Have you heard from him? Have you heard from him?
Who else has the experiences that we've had?
No.
When's the last time you heard anything negative about the Resource Center?
You know, that's the remarkable legacy. I agree with you, Bruce. You know, when again, I was in the interview, I talked about the early days when people did talk very negatively, and I was, again, out there. I'm kind of on the outside going to these programs and speaking and trying to get Mike out to give those speeches, but Mike was hesitant. He really didn't like public speaking.
Right, right.
Like,
I don't know about you, but I feel lucky to have been involved. I made a contribution. It wasn't on my bucket list, but it was just a nice job.
well, you did a remarkable, when you look at the number of facilities that you were permitted to do under Mike's, 10,000 foot view, but somebody had to be on the ground to do it.
Yeah.
Dealing with the contractors, dealing with the employees, dealing with the placement, tough stuff, but you did it.
Yeah. And it was tough, and it was fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you knew you were coming in this morning and wondering probably what was going to happen. Was there a question that you expected me to ask you that I haven't yet?
No, I expected to go over that plaque, though.
Yikes. I opened the door. That'll be my legacy, L.B. Miller. Subsequent, just an aside, many years later, you fired him, and he was in Dunkirk at an event honoring Van Miller. And so L.B. Miller was there, and I was there early.
Really?
And I interviewed Al. I said, you don't remember me, but in the old days of the Resource Center, the floating floor, the pontoon boat, the houseboat, and all of those stories. And he just lit up like a Cheshire cat, about some of the crazy stories. And the houseboat being one of them.
Yeah, I remember that.
What do you remember about that? Mike comes in one day and says, guess what? Somebody's donated a houseboat. And I'm sure he told you first.
What do I remember about that? He turned that into his own bordello. I had to go pull him out of there many times to make a meeting.
Yeah.
But it didn't last very long. The thing broke down and everything, and had 2 engines, and only one would work, and you just spin around in circles and break the docks down and everything. So I think we deep sixed it.
I don't necessarily want to repeat the story, but I have on a couple of times now about when we took the board out on the houseboat. We had a board meeting. And short story, Captain Al, he had the hat, and we had all the food, and it was a beer keg, and it was a board meeting. We were going to have a board meeting on the Chattacoin on the boat. And we all launch off of the Gren dock there.
Yeah.
And, of course, he couldn't get the motor started. And we're floating towards the 6th Street Bridge. And there was a little degree of, I don't want to say panic, but concern that somehow we were not going to get started. And it somehow hit the bridge, kind of, it would be a moment. So there was Caprino and Trousseau and all those guys. And, yeah. But it did. It finally got started. And that's all we did was really just go around in circles.
Who was driving?
Al.
Huh?
L.B. Miller.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, Captain Al. That was during that time period before you fired him.
Okay. I can't remember that.
Yeah. Well, that was good, just as well. Any questions, Steve?
I do have a few, if it's okay.
Sure, shoot.
So Bruce, I know that when a lot of the homes were opening, a lot of people from Willowbrook and some of the other state facilities were coming, but I'm sure that there were some local people who went into the homes, into the day program when it opened. I was just curious whether you have a sense of the gratitude or appreciation that the families had for the fact that these services were finally available to their loved ones.
Oh, my God, yeah. Especially one of my relatives had a Down syndrome daughter. And she was a resident there, and she would just rave about the facility. I mean, it took such a burden off of her, and her daughter was kind of high functioning, and she got into the Benedict department, so she passed away, but she was just so grateful. The Alettes, they had a Down syndrome boy, and he was in the program, and they were just really grateful. I mean, it was a really good thing for the community. So, yeah, it was fine.
Joe Caprino.
Joe Caprino.
Anthony, yeah.
Yeah. Joe did a lot, too. He donated a lot of,
He did.
yeah. Like when we got into the building that he had on 2nd Street, I mean, he provided a lot of the furniture for it. He was always giving us something.
Well, and ultimately, the building was sold to us at a very bargain basement deal.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was doing some research in preparation for this session today, looking back at some of the old newsletters. What I liked about then was Tom McCann and Bruce, the other directors, they would write a column every month that got put into the newsletter. And one of your columns, you talked about how our staff were so efficient at running the homes that the state, what's now the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, wanted us to go out and train the staff of the state homes on how they can efficiently run their homes that they operate. I don't know if you remember that or had a sense of the state looking to us to be the ones to teach their staff how to operate.
Yeah, that kind of bothered me, because they're the ones that created the problem, and now they want to know how to fix the problem. I mean, that kind of disturbed me. I wasn't too fond of them coming in, with their regulations and their briefcases and all of that, and I wasn't too fond at all.
Well, then that kind of leads to my last question. There was an article you written kind of decrying or complaining about the funding disparity, that, the state-operated facilities seem to have all the money that they needed, and the homes and programs operated by the not-for-profit agencies, such as the Resource Center, were always scraping to try to get the money that they needed to operate.
Yeah, they had all the money in the world at Willowbrook, understaffed, squalor for the residents, and did nothing about it. That's what really bugged me. And we needed the money. We're doing a good job. They admitted we're doing a good job. We should have got more money. Mike took care of that, though.
He did.
He did.
The Asheville School, were you part of that? I know we created that. I'm not sure the time frame. Yeah, I remember buying it. I remember that much. Do you remember that at all?
Only in as much as Diana Meckley. She's one I didn't mention. She was like my assistant. She had an office there, but I can't remember when that was. It might have been or after I left.
Just looking here, it looks like we opened that Asheville school in '85.
What was it?
1985.
85? Well, I probably was there, because I didn't leave the Resource Center until 88.
So you were around when Mario Cuomo came to town, and he gave his presentation. That was Harrison Industries. Do you remember Harrison Industries?
I do.
Well, tell me what you remember about that.
Not a lot. No, the Harrison was before I got there, I think. What year was Harrison?
Harrison was about 1984, 85, and what I remember is I went out and got negotiated real estate, the Lundquist Hardware on Harrison Street and some other properties. It was sort of a grouping of properties we were going to buy and either renovate or demolish and create a Harrison Industries. And it was based on a government contract, and that ultimately didn't come to be, but Governor Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, was in town, big event at the City Hall, and announced it. So it was one of those deals where it was awkward after the fact, because we kind of knew things were not moving as quickly as we thought. So the governor comes in to announce it, and it's everybody's sunshine lollipops, and what I really remember about Governor, Cuomo, he's amazing speaker.
Yeah, he is.
Amazing speaker.
Yep.
And he went around before the event started and introduced himself to all the clients and people in the City Hall chambers, and just shook hands. Hi, I'm Governor Cuomo. Hi, I'm Greg Peterson. And somehow he gets up there with no notes and said, these are the people that make it happen, the Resource Center. People like, and then he'd go, he ultimately named everybody in the room. Like our good client, because we had some clients there too, Joe and Tony and Harry, thank you. And then there's the staff who have to deal with it, so-and-so, so-and-so, and the support staff like Greg and da-da-da. And he ultimately, there's 50 people in the room, and he named everyone.
He had one of those earbuds, and somebody was telling him, through the microphone.
It impressed me anyways. But ultimately, in the back of our mind, we knew that deal was starting to unravel. And you didn't dare, you couldn't. So we had to play out, and we had to decide whether we were going to buy the real estate and not have a contract. That would have been not good business. So we had to kind of, for the only time I can really remember, swallow hard and to abort a project. I'm not sure the detail of the contract. That's, maybe McConnell or somebody could tell us.
I don't recall that. I don't even think I was there,
Okay.
but I kind of stayed in my own little world, you know.
Yeah, well, suspended animation, yeah. Okay. Well, this has been great, thank you. I know you're still a working man,
Yes,
and how's business?
really good, really good. Can't get product like anybody else,
Yeah,
but it's really good. But everybody's having that problem. I was working at Home Depot also just for something to do, and they can't get product either.
right.
But it's busy. I wish I could take care of more customers, but I can't because I can't get the product. But
Yeah.
it's good. It's been a good business, 33 years.
And for the camera, what's the name of the business?
M&M Sports Den.
What caused you to buy that? I mean, you kind of bought that sort of, did you go from the research center to buying that?
I did. I had a bucket list. The first one was work for a corporation and run it, and I did. The War Vets was about a $3 million organization. The second was to get my pilot's license, and I did. And the third was to have my own business, and I did. So I'm very happy. That's it. That's my bucket list. And I was always into hunting and fishing, so. But once I bought it, then I couldn't hunt and fish anymore.
You can't even write an article about that, can you? I mean,
No, they won't print it.
well, thank you, Bruce.
Oh,
This has
you're
been
welcome.
great,
Thank
and
you.
thanks for bringing
And
the
I'm
remembrance.
keeping this.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would too. That's invaluable. And it's got a story behind it.